Afternoon, and welcome to Jeff and the Rabbi. Rabbi Freeman, welcome back. Glad you're back in town.
Back in town.
I got to tell you, I'm excited. Passover, very excited. It's a big time of year for me. It's a family gets together. It's a real big thing for us. So, I'm thinking of some of my fondest memories back in the day when I was young, growing up for Passover. I remember back when I was young, I grew up in Virginia, in the Ruhr Valley of Virginia, which is a nice area. And I remember, back in the days, back in Adolf Eichmann Primary School, when I went to school there, my mother would load me up with my matzah, peanut butter and jelly sandwich in my little Fonzie lunchbox. I would go to school and take it out and eat it in the cafeteria. The difference there is, I know you guys today call the bread of affliction. Mm-hmm. It was called the bread of cheap Jews, is what it was. They said because it was so little, that's why we made it so little, because we couldn't afford to we didn't want to spend the money to put the rest of the bread in it.
Right.
So that was my first memories. And then I remember, growing up where I did in Virginia was a little different probably than you. We had a good mix of Jews there, from all denominations, and we celebrated differently. So it was different. We had I know you didn't think so, but we had very religious Jews also there. I mean, not religious like you with the beard and the hat and the suit, but they were very religious. I mean, they were definitely observed Shabbos, observed Sabbath. I mean, not on.
They had the beard, but they didn't have a mustache.
They didn't have the mustache, but they did observe Shabbos.
Right.
Not on Saturdays, but what's one day? Sunday, Saturday, what's one day? So they observed the Sabbath. They wanted to fit in a little more, but so there was like one day off. So they were very religious. And the religious Jews there, the way they would celebrate the holiday is they would have the Pesach Seder, which was great. Then we had over at the conservative synagogue. We have a conservative synagogue. They were a little bit less, but they observed it well. They called it the Passover Seder, which was good. I belong to the Reformed temple. It's a little different there, but we celebrated as well. But we just called it the Easter dinner. It was a little different, but we all celebrated in our own way, which was good. So I think that's the great thing is Jews, diverse Jews everywhere. We all celebrate Passover, even if we don't do the other ones. We celebrate Passover.
Right. And let me ask you, so what was your takeaway from the Seder? You had the Seder, I assume.
We definitely had the Seder.
So what was your takeaway from that?
Beside the part at the end when you open the door and the Easter Bunny comes in to drink that last cup of wine, beside that, it was the family. The family together. We got together and we felt that we were all Jews. Mm-hmm. One way or another, we'd heard the story that we were Jews.
Okay.
That's what we got.
Okay. Do you think and that's what your parents were trying to?
I think my parents were, it was the family thing was important, but it was also just to put the story out there. This is Jews. This is why we're Jews. And that was pretty much the story. And the story was similar every year, so it stuck in my mind.
The same story every year.
Same story, yes. And we didn't really change it. Even though we were Reformed, we didn't really change it that much to meet the modern age.
Right. And what about that story taught you about your family and that you're Jews?
Well, that we came from suffering, came from a struggle. We all together left as we were not like other people. We were oppressed. We left. We became Jews, and because of that, we're different.
Wow,
that's what I got out of it.
That's a nice message.
Not much more.
Well, the question really is, and since that time, now you were like, 6, 7, 8. 9, 10?
Yes.
Okay, now, and since that time, what more have you understood from that Pesach Seder?
Well, it gets a little deeper. Now that I'm older, you can study a little deeper. I mean, the whole understanding of what bondage is and what it meant, and, does it really necessarily mean just that we were slaves?
This is a family show. I don't know if we need to...
Oh, yeah, no, that's right. Actually, bondage is for the later, just the after hours show that we do. Sorry, my bad. You're correct. But what does it mean to be enslaved? What does it mean to what does it mean to leave Egypt? Where are we really going? Are we getting? Do we go to gain an identity? Do we go to become something? What happened? You study a little bit more when you get older.
Okay, so let me ask you this.
Okay.
Let me ask you this. I hope you don't mind if I like.
No, please.
It seems as though I'm going to change the subject.
That's okay.
You ever seen The Wizard of Oz?
I have definitely seen The Wizard of Oz. One of my favorites.
Could you tell me the story of The Wizard of Oz?
Lots of midgets. Lots of midgets, and you know how I feel about midgets.
Love midgets. Jeff's a midgets guy.
I love the midget thing. You start out in this nice black and white setting here in Kansas. It's nothing really exciting, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, tornado. There I am, as we talked about last week in Technicolor.
Right.
There I am, this beautiful thing, and there's a land of midgets. Now there's a witch, there's a good witch,
right,
and there's a lot of happy, good singing.
So if someone asks you, like, what's the Wizard of Oz all about, you would tell them in a sentence or two?
There's no place like home. That's what I would say. There's
no place like home.
No, yeah, I would tell them, listen, you know, it's a story. It's a story of travel. You're traveling. You're moving from one place to another. And she grows. She learns. She understands that, you know, and she gets a lot of knowledge.
Got it.
That's it.
Okay, beautiful.
And I like those little flying monkeys, though. I really like those flying monkeys.
Right. Good witch, bad witch, and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, all the reprises of that, like currently, there's one right now, the Great and Magnificent.
Oh, right, the new movie they're making.
New movie, right. Okay.
Haven't seen that yet.
No. So, now I could ask all our followers out there in TV land, internet land, what is the Wizard of Oz about? And I bet you there's somebody out there that's jumping up and down in their seat because they took a college course. And in this college course, they studied the Wizard of Oz, which just shows you what higher education is all about. The Wizard of Oz was written by a guy named Baum, late 1890s, and he was a satirist. And the guy that illustrated it was a political cartoonist.
I didn't know that.
Most likely, this was meant to be a satire and a lampoon of something else.
I've actually heard this. I've actually heard this before.
Now, there are different approaches. I think there's 4 primary different schools of understanding of the Wizard of Oz. And the Yellow Brick Road is, should they stay on the gold standard? Right? And the Tin Man is the industrialist, and the, you know, and the militarists, and there was really a scarecrow, and the lion is really, you know, all that type of stuff.
I've heard that, yeah.
And there's a lot of criticism, a lot of critique of Teddy Roosevelt, and all this type of stuff. Now, if you'd ask most people, though, they'd say it's the story of this girl, and she gets in a tornado, and there's a wizard, and she wants to find her way home, and all that stuff. Now, how come we didn't know about the fact that it's talking about the gold standard?
Nobody told us.
Nobody told us, and no one ever sat down and thought later on, I wonder what that was really all about. So let's study it out and let's analyze it. No one does that. And that's really the problem. Is that we learn things when we're children. We develop an image or an impression of them when we're a child, and we go with it. And we live with it our whole life. Now we're adults, confronting all kinds of adult decisions and adult challenges, and we know this cute little Exodus from Egypt story.
Right.
And we're left with this Exodus from Egypt story. And we sit pat with the Exodus from Egypt story. And when we have a problem in life, we want to struggle and find out who we are and what we are. So we might go to a psychologist. We might go to Tibet. We might study Zen. We might do all kinds of things. We'll certainly go to the self-help aisle.
Absolutely.
But who would ever think of going back to the Torah?
Yeah.
We, as Jews, suffer from a curse. And the curse is Hebrew school.
Hebrew school, yeah. I remember it.
So we're all living with Hebrew school Torah. And we all think that we understand Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We think that we understand the Exodus from Egypt.
Right.
And if not, many of us saw the movie. Some saw the older generation, saw the Charlton Heston version. The younger generation has seen Prince of Egypt. But everyone's seen the movie. And that's it. But nothing deeper.
No.
No. And we leave it like that. And therefore, we're going to sit down, come 1 week from tonight, we're going to sit down, and what are we going to do? As adults, we're going to proceed to relate the kiddie version of the Exodus from Egypt to our children, so that they will now know the kiddie version, and they will relate the kiddie version to their children, and they'll relate the kiddie version to their children. It's amazing that we keep doing this generation after generation.
That's true, though.
And no one is stopping to think, what's really going on here? Should I still be telling this story over as an adult the way I learned it as a child? Now, I don't want to knock the kiddie version. There's one benefit to the kiddie version. If you want to understand the Wizard of Oz, so if you learned it as a kid, and you know the whole story, and you watched it every year on TV, so you know the whole story back and forward, then we can sit down and we can have a discussion. We can get right into it, and I can tell you this is what the scarecrow meant, and this is what the
later on we can talk
right.
about it. Right.
And when we grow up, and this is what those flying monkeys were all about,
Right.
and the good witch and bad, because you know the story inside and out.
Right.
If you didn't, I'd have to spend all this time teaching you. Well, there's a witch, and you'd have to like appreciate and understand.
It would take a lot longer to try to figure it out.
But at least this way you know the story, so we can get in. Now that we turn adults, we can dig in. So it's good to learn as a child, but it's bad to learn as a child if you think that that's the end. Whatever I learned as a child, that's it.
Right.
And there's nothing more so, no facet more so, even more than the Wizard of Oz, is the kiddie version than the Seder and the Haggadah, the story of the Exodus from Egypt. And Rabbi Jose said, and you dip your finger in the wine, and you that's the thing, and Uncle Joe knocks over the cup of Elio, and we open the door, and and everyone says, let's eat, and then,
You just described our whole Seder there. Yeah, that was it.
Kiddie version, par excellence,
Yep.
and we are dedicated to repeating the kiddie version, so much so that if Uncle Joe doesn't knock over the cup, someone's probably going to reach over and knock it over just to remember how Uncle Joe knocked it over.
Yeah, tradition. Right.
Got to do it.
Yep.
Okay, it's ridiculous. So what's it really all about?
That's the question.
What is it really all about? So I'll tell you in a word. One word. It really sums up the whole story.
Okay.
Gratitude.
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 Okay.
How do you like that? Gratitude.
You know.
Not bondage. Not even for the adult show.
Right.
Right? Not bondage, not slavery, and most importantly, not freedom. I think
Not
if I was
freedom.
going to put it out there for one word,
I think freedom would
I
probably
think
be the big one.
freedom would have won it. Freedom would have probably won it hands down.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And I'm sure, at some point, you're going to see the President of the United States is going to get up and make a statement and tell our Jewish friends is celebrating the holiday of freedom from slavery and, so on and so forth.
As long as you're within the 67 borders.
That's
Sorry. My God.
That's
Keep
right.
doing that.
That's right. So, and probably
Sorry, probably knocked you off track there.
Pharaoh and all of his guys are clearly Republicans. That was obvious, right?
I'm sure. That's what you'll hear.
Anyway, it's gratitude.
Yep.
It's really gratitude, and that's the amazing thing. And I can show you an interesting proof to that. Just so happens I've got my Haggadah here, with a beautiful cover.
I got one just like that, I think.
This one says Passover Haggadah, Publix.
Oh, no, mine was Kroger. Sorry.
Maybe it should say Kroger or Maxwell House.
I have Maxwell House as well.
Maxwell Houses,
Eclectic collection of
Right.
Haggadahs at my house.
Now, when we get to the story part, after we've gotten through all the preambles and all the 4 questions and the 4 sons and the rabbi stayed up all night and all that stuff, we're done with all that.
Right.
We're finally we're going to roll up our sleeves and tell the story. We're getting down to it.
Yep.
Okay, now, how do the rabbis decide when they wrote up this Haggadah? Because the Torah says that you should tell your children on that night is because of this that God did for me when I left Egypt. Now, we're supposed to tell this story. How do we tell the story? So our sages came up with like a motif to tell the story.
All right.
Where did they get their motif from? Interestingly enough, the sages got their motif from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 26, verses 5, 6, 7, and 8.
All right. Those guys.
Chapter Deuteronomy, you can look it up, chapter 26, verses 5 through 8. They took those verses, 5, 6, 7, 8, those 4 verses, and they used them as the motif to tell the whole story of the Exodus of Egypt. What's going on in Deuteronomy chapter 26?
You think they'd be going to Exodus?
You would think, if you really want to tell the story over, Exodus chapter 1
It's called Exodus.
through 13, and that's the story.
And that's right there.
Just read the story, right? What are you going to Deuteronomy for? So we take a look at Deuteronomy, and we see, and it says in Deuteronomy, when you come into the land and you farm your crops, you take your first fruits that grow every year in the crop.
Right.
You collect the first of the crop, you take it off to Jerusalem, and you bring it as an offering. And while in Jerusalem, when you make the offering, you make a proclamation. And what's the proclamation? the farmer's proclamation, every year, every crop, the farmer proclaims Deuteronomy chapter 26, verses 5, 6, 7, 8. And this is what he says. He says, an Aramean tried to destroy my forefather. He descended to Egypt and sojourned there, few in number, and he became a nation great, strong, and numerous. The Egyptians mistreated us and afflicted us, placed hard work upon us. Then we cried out to God, God of our fathers, and God heard our voice, saw our affliction, our travail, and our oppression. God took us out of Egypt with a strong hand, outstretched arm, with awesomeness, and signs and wonders.
I got it.
That's it.
Well, that is gratitude.
And therefore, that little story, then in the Haggadah, they take that story and they take each of those phrases, they break it down into 20 phrases.
Interesting. I never heard
and
this.
And each one of those becomes a paragraph heading in our Haggadah. And you'll see, if you have a Haggadah, when we're telling the story, each paragraph, maybe it'll have a bold, and that bold is the quote from those 4 verses, and then they elaborate on that. And when we're all done, we've told the story.
Wow.
Now my question is, why pick those 4 verses and then elaborate on them? Why not go straight to Exodus, where the story happened, and you don't have to elaborate. You have the whole story right there.
That's a good point.
Why are we going to the farmer? And why is the farmer, when he brings his fruit, giving us this little history lesson, Egypt and
why is he bringing up Egypt?
Just say, thank you, God, for helping me have a good crop.
That's true.
What's that all about?
We do bring it up quite often.
Gratitude.
Gratitude.
Okay. Now let's say, for example, I don't know, I've never been there, but let's say I would go to the boardroom at the Kellogg's Corporation.
Okay.
Right? I would bet you that if you go in the boardroom, I think it's an odds-on bet.
Okay.
If you go in the boardroom, you're going to see a picture there.
Captain Crunch? No.
I bet you can see a picture of Mr. Kellogg.
Oh, I thought Captain Crunch.
And Mr. Kellogg's probably going to be standing next to a horse.
Right.
With a wagon.
Right.
And on the back it'll say, on the wagon, paint on the side says something like, George Kellogg's Fine Cereals and Grains.
Right, right.
Right? And they got that on the boardroom so that when everyone sits down there, or if you go to General Mills, there'll be a picture of the General himself.
Actually, that could have been where Captain Crunch was from. But anyway.
Right, Mr. General Mills, and he'll be sitting up there in front of a wagon, General Mills, fine, something like that.
Yep.
Right? Why do you got that picture up there for?
Remember, that's who the guy, he did it, he started it all.
Because when you've got it all, the only way to really appreciate it is to look back and to see.
That's true.
To see, hey, this wasn't always here.
The humble beginnings right here.
Humble beginnings. You got to go back to your humble beginnings, because otherwise you don't appreciate what you've got.
Very good point.
And therefore, we go back to our humble beginnings.
Very good point.
2 ways it talks about. On the one hand, very humble beginnings, we used to be idolaters, and now we've been elevated from that. And also, we were slaves. So really humble.
That's pretty humble.
Idolatry and slavery.
Couldn't get any lower.
I mean, it's the worst.
Yep.
And now we worship God, one God, beautiful thing, and we're free men. It's also beautiful. So we've got to go back. And not only that, not only do we have to go back, it says in the Haggadah, in every generation, you're obligated to view yourself as though you left Egypt.
Now that makes a little more sense now.
So recently, I had an opportunity. So I was about to teach this in a class. So I had a great idea. I said, I'm going to take a look at Hall of Fame speeches. Hall of Fame speeches. I'll do it for you.
Okay.
Okay?
No, you're right. I'm right.
Jeff, you have been elected to the Hall of Fame. You can fill it in whatever Hall of Fame you want.
Right.
Hall of Fame of internet marketers.
Oh, yeah.
Hall of Fame of football.
Yep.
Whatever. Probably the Hall of Fame of Bama alumni.
Yep, I could be that.
Whatever it is. Whatever, maybe Hall of Fame of great husbands. I don't know, whatever.
I'm sure. I've already been elected to that one. That's different.
For sure. So whatever Hall of Fame. So you've been elected, and you're going to give the acceptance speech.
Yep.
Okay? So, you're going to come up there now. You stand up from everyone's gathered together. They're going to hear your acceptance speech. What are the main points that you want to touch on,
no doubt,
without which you would feel that this just wouldn't be an acceptable
Well,
speech.
that's easy. Where it
What
all
would you
started.
say?
First, where it all started.
Yeah.
You know, back when I was just football. Back when I was in the little leagues of football, I threw my first ball. My father threw me the ball. I caught the ball. I dropped it. Started very humbly.
Right.
That's where I would start. Then I'd show you the progress of how it happened. I was trained. I learned. I got better at football, and then then I became a champion. I'm a champion. But this is where it all started, and that's what's going to bring everybody to tears. By the way,
right. That's right.
Humble beginnings.
So I checked it out because I knew that was the case.
Yep.
So I checked it out and I watched the acceptance speeches of Rod Carew, Nolan Ryan, Kyle Yastrzemski, Emmett Smith, and one other. Who did I forget? I'm missing one. I watched one other.
That's funny.
I watched them. And you know what?
Every
Sure
speech.
enough, true to form, right? Nolan Ryan gets up there and he says, my Pop Warner coach,
Right.
my middle school coach, and my high school coach, and they're here with me today. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here, says Emmett Smith, right? Okay, or Nolan Ryan. Emmett Smith, first thing he gets up and he says, thank you, God, for giving me this talent, and thank you, Mr. Jerry Jones, for recognizing in me that a 5'9" running back has talent, right?
There you go.
And Jerry's right here with me. Now, it got even more interesting. Of course, a number of them, thank you to my wife for putting up with me in all these years, and it's tough to be in the sports and all that without a husband X number of months a year, and so on and so forth. And then you got Kyle Yastrzemski. Said two things I thought were fascinating. Kyle Yastrzemski said, when my dad grew up in the Depression, my dad was a great athlete, but my dad had to feed his family, his parents, and his siblings.
Right.
And he went to work because he couldn't play ball. He had to go make money. So he worked to feed his parents and his siblings, and then my mom and us, and he raised us.
Wow.
And because my dad sacrificed everything, that's why we're here. And if it wasn't for the fact that Dad laid it all on the line and worked so hard, he says, I want my dad to get up right now. And Dad got up and everyone clapped for his dad, and Dad was crying and all that. Right? And then he said another great thing. He said, I was called up to the big leagues. I was up the first 2 months of the season. I was batting .220, playing for the Boston Red Sox. And I thought, man, I can't hit major league pitching.
Right.
I'm washed up. So someone gave him a telephone number of a guy to talk to. And he called this guy up. The guy was fishing in New Brunswick. And the guy came down, spent 3 days with him. Just spent 3 days talking to him. Just talking to him. And after 3 days, he convinced him that he could make it in the bigs. And the rest of the season, he batted .330.
All right.
And went on to a Hall of Fame career.
History, yeah.
Says, I want to thank Mr. Ted Williams for coming down and talking to me.
That's pretty good.
Right. So, you know, and then he said, if Ted Williams hadn't come down and talk, you never hear the name. You might have never heard the name Kyle Yastrzemski.
Wow.
Might mean nothing to you.
Wow.
Right? And if my dad hadn't done this, and each and every one of these guys, Rod Carew gets up. He says, you know why my name is Rodney? Because I was born on a train in Panama.
Oh.
Single mom gave birth to me on a train in Panama. There happened to be a doctor on the train, and he delivered me. His first name was Rodney. Wow. My mom named me after the doctor.
Wow.
And they went along and did pretty good. Hall of Fame and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
In other words, if you're at the pinnacle, you have to go back and realize that if it wasn't for that,
You wouldn't have been there.
I wouldn't even be here.
Right.
Forget about even standing here. In many of these cases, I might not even exist. Right? I might not even forget about it. Otherwise, it just would have been some guy working somewhere, working in an office or who knows what. And instead, I'm this. Because of these people. Because at this moment, this person decided to do something. This person made a decision. Well, guess what? If it wasn't for God, who took us out of Egypt, right?
Right.
We say right in the beginning of the story, if it wasn't for him, then we and our children and our children's children. This is the first paragraph we say. And if God had not taken us out of there, our forefathers from Egypt, we and our children and our children's children would still be slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. So therefore, it doesn't matter how wise we are and how understanding we are and how elderly we are and how much we know the Torah. We have to tell the story. It doesn't matter how rich you are, Emmett Smith, and how wealthy you are, Nolan Ryan, and how accomplished you are, all these guys. You got to get up there right now and say, I want to thank my Little League coach.
Right, my elementary teacher.
Yeah, right, because without them, nothing would happen. And then you can appreciate it. If you don't thank them and realize that without them wouldn't happen, you can't appreciate it.
It's amazing. That's true. That's good. And the great thing about this is, luckily, none of my family watches the show, so I'm going to be using everything you just said at our Seder. And it'll be brand new. They're going to think I'm a genius, which is great. Luckily, they don't watch the show. But that's actually amazing.
And I'll prove to you how this is the theme of what it's all about, because we get to the very favorite part of everyone, Dayenu.
I was just going to bring it up. I was going to say Dayenu during your story of the Rabbi Karu there.
Yeah, but what do you think? So how does it all come out to Dayenu? Yeah. Why do we go through each and every one of the points? Because we say each and every one of those things was crucial.
Yep.
As without it, it would have been great if we got out of Egypt, but then if God had left us there, so it'd be a better way in Egypt, free, but not like this,
Torah,
right? We'd have gone to, but we didn't get to Israel. Well, it would have been nice, but not this, and so on and so forth. And we go through the Dayenu, and that's what the Dayenu is all about. And therefore, we come to a point, and we say at the end of the story, okay, we told this whole story of the Exodus of Egypt. And then we say, in each and every generation, every person has to view himself as though he personally left Egypt. Because although that may have happened, so that struggle in the depression that Karl Yastrzemski's dad did,
even though he didn't experience it.
But that's me. That was because of me. That was my struggle through the depression.
That's interesting.
And therefore, I have to view myself, and that's what it says, you have to tell your children. So everyone has to tell their children that this is you, kid. And you know where he heard it from? You heard it from your dad. And you know where your dad heard it from? His dad.
Yep.
And therefore, we got to repeat that story. And therefore,
interesting, very interesting.
And therefore, when we're all done with that, and it was, I got the Egypt story, and I got the fact that the Egypt story is my story, then what does the Haggadah say? I went through all the Dayenus. Then the Haggadah says, therefore, gratitude. It is our duty to thank, to laud, to praise, to glorify, to exalt, to adore, to bless, to elevate, and to honor the one who did all these miracles for our fathers and for us. He took us from slavery to freedom, from sorrow to joy, from mourning to festivity, from deep darkness into great light, from bondage to redemption. Let us therefore recite before him, hallelujah, praises to God.
Wow. Well, there it is. That's the whole thing.
That's the story right there.
That's amazing.
Beginning to end. That's your whole story right there. And then we do a couple of praises to God, and we raise our cup, and we say, thank you, God, for redeeming us, and we drink it, and we're on to the meal.
So how come you have like a 5 or 6 or 7 hour Seder? You just did this whole thing here in about 20 minutes.
I'll tell you why. Because if you want, when Karl Yastrzemski gets up and he says the story, he says, my dad struggles through depression.
Right.
But when he's sitting with the family and Dad's sitting there,
right.
He said, Dad, tell us what it was like.
So Dad
gets in there and he starts telling you, how hungry we were. I was working 3 jobs. And I was and I was happy to have jobs. And how long, what I saw, and people were homeless. And he gets into all the detail, and everyone's sitting down and go, wow.
So they feel it.
When it's all done, you really, really feel it. So we didn't just touch on the the headings, which I just did.
Right.
You dig in. You talk about what it was really like. You talk about where you've been. If it's the Holocaust, we talk about the Holocaust.
Right.
Talk about expulsion from Spain. What it was like when people had to leave and they were expelled, and there were the pogroms and torture and all the different things that happened to us in all the different generations. There's a lot to talk about.
It really is.
A lot to experience. And a lot to really, really appreciate, that this isn't just something, maybe my high school coach. And along the way, how many miracles? Just yesterday, one of the fathers of one of our Kollel members told his Holocaust survival story.
Right.
A miracle a minute.
Wow.
Because every minute that the man survived, there had to be a miracle.
Without a doubt, right.
Otherwise, without a miracle, you're dead. Because everyone else is dead.
Right, everyone else is dying right around you.
Natural was dead.
Right.
So, so which of the miracles do you think you should skip?
That's a good point.
You know,
That's a good point.
which when you're telling over the story, oh well, that miracle wasn't so. What do you mean? If every one of
Right.
them was essential, you have to tell the whole
You
story.
could have lived with each one of them without
So
every
you
one
can't
of them.
skip any one of them.
Right.
So that's what we're doing this in. That's what goes on for hours.
Wow, my kids are going to be so happy we talked today. We're going on for hours. And I
Send
say
them
that-
over to my house.
No, I don't think they can handle that.
They'd have a good old time.
That's actually amazing. I got to tell you this. I'm going to have my best Seder ever this year because this is good.
So you got to stop and you got to think like,
That really
where'd you
that's
come
good.
from?
Right.
So when you're talking about like telling them about your, Adolf Eichmann High School,
Right.
yeah, I mean the kids should understand what that was really all about.
Right.
They need to understand
true.
that.
No, that's true.
They need to understand what this experience was and what it feels like, and and now they're here and they're going to Jewish schools, and
Wow. Okay. This is actually going to be a killer Seder, as they say. This is
Yeah, right.
This is going to be big.
when you'll know it's done if at the end when they raise that cup and they say thank you God for redeeming us from all of that. If people feel it, then you made it.
And we did it. Okay. Wow.
And that's why, just to tie it all up, we go back to the farmer. Because the farmer, when he brings in his first fruits, he's got to express gratitude. And the only way to express gratitude is got to go all the way back to the beginning. This crop didn't just come from nowhere.
Right.
This crop, I might not even been a farmer. I could have
wasn't
died
this.
all the way back there with Laban or in Egypt. And the fact that all that stuff happened, and all that's relevant to this crop right now.
Now that's amazing. That is amazing.
And that's why we pick that as the motif for our Seder.
Wow. All right, this is big. I mean, all these years, I guess I'm finally knowing what happened to the Wizard of Oz. This is the details.
That's right.
I like this. Well, I think a good idea would be this one needs to go viral. I think you need to send this this video right here to your friends, to your Jewish friends that are just going to be thinking about Charlton Heston and a great scene when he splits the sea. This is a little deeper.
Right. It's not just freedom, it's gratitude.
Gratitude. Oh, excellent. Well, have a great Pesach, and we'll see you when we get back.
Yeah.